Okay, I'm trying something different for sharing for this session, so let me know if this works. Okay, are we able to see this, or is it just black? Hey, magical. Okay, uh, so before we get into the actual practice today, I'm going to talk a little bit about um, what's called the 9 stages of meditation. The 9 stages of meditation is a formulation invented, as far as I can tell, by Kamala Shila, who's one of the sort of uh, great scholar slash yogi practitioners of India, on whose work much of Tibetan meditative commentaries and so forth are written. And he's mainly focused on how do you attain the first, maybe up to about the fourth jhana. How do you perfect concentration on an object, right? And the way this is described is going to take a little bit of setup to understand. So we previously talked about the two mental factors that you need in order to train in meditation. You need um, non-forgetfulness, right, or mindfulness. You need let's just let's just simplify and call it mindfulness for now. So you need mindfulness, this quality of not forgetting, and then you need alertness, this quality of being aware of how your of what the quality of your mind is, right? So you're applying these two in order to overcome two main problems that you have in meditation. So the two main problems that you have in meditation are what's called excitement, in Tibetan gupa. And this word can be translated in so many different ways, and each of them are actually quite useful. So just double checking again, everyone can see, yes? Right. Okay. So good. So agitation, excitement, flightedness, mental flightedness, or flightiness, forgetfulness, non-recollection, uh, ebullience, or restlessness. So these are all words in English that have been used to try to translate this one term, mental excitement, or gupa in Tibetan. So mental excitement is this quality of mind that, to jump ahead a little bit, to place your mind on a meditative object, your mind is compelled by attachment, which is another technical term, uh, to lose its hold on the object of cognition, and is drawn uncontrollably to another object, which can be either virtuous or non-virtuous. So, for example, you could be really excited by the fact that you did a lot of Vajrasattva prayers, or that uh, you know you were working really hard in your meditative practice yesterday, and you think, oh yes, I did so good with my meditation yesterday, and that thought pulls you off of the selected object. So if the selected object was the breath, anytime you have a positive, you associating something positive with some experience, which is actually, it might be helpful to go back now and get a little bit more precise on what attachment is. uh, so excitement is a derivative of a mental factor called attachment. In Buddhism, there are three main mental problems that we all have. One is ignorance, which is that we misperceive and misknow certain things. We see things as inherently existent instead of dependently arisen. We see things as permanent instead of being constantly changing. We see things that don't have an inherent identity as having inherent identities. There are these cognitive mistakes that we make all the time that cause negative emotion. The two primary negative emotions, or negative mental states, to be a little bit more general, that we experience are attachment and aversion. Excitement, this mental factor that pulls your mind off of a meditative object, is a derivative of attachment. So, what is attachment? Attachment, again, when you look up this word raga, or this Tibetan word duchak, uh, it can be translated or sort of interpreted in a number of different ways. So if you look in the Pali literature, if you look in, you know, academic literature, all over the place, you'll see a ton of different words used: greed, sensuality, desire, craving, excitement for sensory objects, lust, sexual desire, passion. So depending upon the context, this one word, raga, will be pressed into service, so to speak, to describe all of these different things. So what is the actual mental activity that is held in common with all of these things, right? That should be the question. So attachment is a mental factor, a type of mental activity that colors your cognition, that keenly seeks to acquire something contaminated by the misconception that pleasurable objects can cause happiness on account of conceiving the object or whatever it is the mind is pointed at as intrinsically attractive. Okay? So that's a very technical definition. Let's get a little bit more elaborate. So when we observe an internal or external pleasant object and we're attracted to that object, we have this feeling of wanting to see it, wanting to touch it. Not only do we want to see it and touch it, we want to touch them or see them again and again. So you find a nice TV show on Netflix you like, and then you want to watch more and more and more episodes, even after you stop enjoying it and you stop getting the pleasure you thought should be there. You still carry on watching it for some reason. And this is because your mind has exaggerated the benefits that you can get from the TV show, so that even when the pleasure goes away, your mind is still very busy exaggerating. Oh yes, if I just keep watching it, I'll get that happiness, that pleasure, again and again, as long as I can be close to the object, as long as I can continue consuming the television show. So he goes on to say, if we divide pleasant or external factors even further, there are pleasant visual forms, pleasant sounds, pleasant odors, pleasant tastes, and so on. Whether these objects are actually pleasant or not, the mental factor of desire, i.e., raga, this mental factor of attachment, sees them as pleasant in their own right and is attached and attracted to them. So, right. So, when you look, for example, Venerable Aryadeva, who's a very important scholar, in his 400 stanzas in the middle way, has this really hilarious description of how attachment works, where he basically says, the thing about objects of pleasure is this: every object of pleasure, actually, if you look at the types of suffering in Buddhism, you have dukkha, right? The suffering of suffering. In other words, you stub your toe and it hurts and you don't want that experience. That's obvious suffering, the suffering of suffering. And then there's the suffering of change, which is a funny name because actually what it's referring to is pleasure. Pleasure, any pleasure that you can think of, and you really should spend some time thinking about this, every pleasure you can think of, if you continue to engage in it continuously, becomes pain. So if you sit and you find a great television show, a great Netflix series, and you continue to watch and watch and watch, and you don't stand up and you don't move and you just sit there and try to watch it, pretty soon you start to feel uncomfortable. And if you then you go through the whole series and you loved it, and then you go back and you start from the beginning and you watch it again, you go back, you watch it again, pretty soon you're going, this is horrible. I have to stop doing this. I need to find something else. And it becomes torturous to watch your favorite show, right? So pleasure is revealed to be a type of suffering through the way that it changes into boredom and then pain, obvious pain. So Aryadeva has this hilarious sort of discussion where he says, well, the suffering of pleasure is revealed through direct experience. If you stand up too long, it's a pleasure to lay down. But then if you lay down too long, it's a pleasure and a relief to stand up. And if you abstain from sex for too long, then it's a relief to find a sexual partner and have release. But if you overindulge in sex, then it becomes uncomfortable and unwanted. If you eat too much, it's a relief to stop eating. And we have one Greek person in the audience who, I'm not sure how the Greeks are, but my Italian relatives, if you went over, they would the grannies, the old ladies would constantly be trying to feed you more food. So if you continue to eat and eat, eventually it's painful. You feel sick. You cannot fit in another bite, and it's uncomfortable. And it's actually a relief to stop eating. On the other hand, if you stop eating for too long, it's a relief to eat. If you're away from home for too long, it's a relief to go home. But then if you stay at home for too long, it's a huge relief to leave. And then he has all these other ones where it's like, well, if you have a bag on your left shoulder, it's a relief to move it to your right. But then if it's on your right shoulder for too long, it's a relief to move it to your left. And so the suffering of change, i.e. pleasure, means that we spend our entire lives continuously chasing the next temporary relief from whatever it was we were experiencing before. We were either experiencing some type of pleasure that had finally been revealed to be boring and uncomfortable, or we were trying to get away from some obviously uncomfortable thing like stubbing our toe and experiencing pain. So we're always in this process of chasing the next source of temporary relief and believing it's happiness. That's attachment. Because we believe that temporary relief is actual happiness, we're constantly chasing it, looking for the next way to feel good, feel comfortable, feel complete. In reality, this approach never succeeds. You can never consume enough pleasurable sources of stuff through your senses to achieve a stable internal state. You get momentary relief, and then just as quickly, within a period of time, you're experiencing pain and discomfort again, you're experiencing boredom again, etc. Furthermore, quite often, pleasure has something to do with things being novel, being new. So as time goes on, you get more bored with a new source of pleasure, and it's never quite the same as it was in the beginning. And then it gets sort of slowly worse and worse quite often, unless you can control your mind. So regarding excitement, once again, we're talking about meditation. Regarding excitement, the primary problem stopping you from training and concentration is mental excitement, which is a derivative of attachment. Attachment is when you mentally exaggerate the benefits that you get from pleasure, to put it yet another way. And one of the things that happens when you mentally exaggerate the benefits you get from pleasure is you see a beautiful woman on the street or a very attractive man on the street, whatever you're attracted to, and it's almost like they're glowing, It's like the air around them is electric and tingling. And or you see you go by a shop window and it has your favorite baked good in there, or you just woke up in the morning and you get to the coffee maker and the coffee looks almost divine, And you look at the coffee and the way it steams and you get all romantic about it. So this exaggeration of the positive qualities of things appears in your perception also. So when you're attracted to something, because you think it could make you happy, not just provide temporary relief, but could actually make you happy on the inside and make you completely stable on the inside, because you're chasing that, your mind exaggerates what appears in front of you and makes it look even better, even more sparkly, even more attractive than it normally would be. So this exaggeration is attachment. When you're trying to train in concentration, a derivative of that is mental excitement. Mental excitement means you tried to place your mind on your breath, for example, and then your mind got pulled away. You were cognitively engaging, right? You were holding an object of cognition, i.e., the breath, and your mind was uncontrollably drawn away to a different object of concentration because you were attached to that object of concentration. And critically, that can be a virtuous or non virtuous object. If you're trying to train in concentration and you are exaggerating the benefits of recalling some virtuous activity, oh, I'm so good. Yesterday I did this, and the last 2 years I did that, and blah blah. If you're doing all this sort of thing, then your mind's getting pulled off the object. So the primary problem that you have in training and concentration is, in the beginning, excitement. Furthermore, excitement has two different categories: gross or coarse, or you could even say more obvious excitement is the first category. And then the second is subtle excitement. So gross or coarse or obvious excitement is when your mind is forcefully pulled off the object of meditation because it's seeking satisfaction by engaging with some object other than your object of meditation. In other words, you tried to put your mind on the object and you did that for like 30 seconds, and then your mind went, this is boring. I'm not getting the satisfaction I was expecting from this. And then it tries to jump and pull you off to anything else. When in reality, by definition, if you could just keep your mind in one place, it would be satisfied, right? Satisfaction means your mind is happy to stay in one place. So instead of staying where you put it, the mind begins seeking satisfaction through chasing pleasure again. And so either by remembering past pleasures or imagining certain pleasures that might come in the future, or by being attracted by something that's happening in the present moment, even just something new, right? You're sitting there and you've been trying to focus on your breath, and then a sound happens somewhere across the way and your mind goes, oh, what was that? That's not that. Oh, that's a new sound. Okay. So that's coarse excitement. Gross excitement happens across the road and you go, oh, that sounds like someone's car backed up to the shop this year. They probably should take it. If your car is backing up, if your car is misfiring, that's not good. Maybe their engine is flooded. I don't really know much about engines, right? And so your mind just starts creating this whole story and adding things to it and remembering things. So gross excitement is this part of that process where your mind gets pulled off because it's going after something attractive. Now, of course, your mind can get pulled off the object of concentration because it's being pulled towards something you don't like. But that's a less common problem. It can get pulled off the object because you regret some non-virtuous thing that you did. It can get pulled off the object because you're tired. It can get pulled off the object for a host of other reasons. But Kamala Sheila says the primary problem you need to overcome, in the early stages of training and meditation is that your mind gets excited. Your mind is flighty. It flies off the object. Your mind is forgetful. It forgets that you tried to stay on the object. Mind fails to remember that it was trying to stay on the object, and there's really good reasons to stay on the object, and right? Mental agitation, the mind becomes agitated. It goes, oh, this is too boring, and it jumps off to say, oh, this, if I chase this thing, then finally I'll have some satisfaction. This meditation's for the, it's too boring. So the mind sort of becomes agitated, it becomes excited, it flies and jumps off the object. The mind forgets what it was doing and why that's important, and it jumps off and tries to chase some other object, right? So all of these translations for Gupa, or we have one person who speaks not Sanskrit, but the derivative language of Sanskrit, who would be able to pronounce this properly. Okay, so then there is subtle excitement, in which your mind doesn't leave the object, but this is described as subtle forgetfulness. Subtle excitement is like when you have a frozen river and there's water underneath it and you can hear it gurgling. So Yangtze Rinpoche, who's a really fantastic reincarnate Lama, who runs the Maitripa Institute, he says it's like you have distractions arising in the background of your mind. Okay, so this is actually pretty advanced. This I'm going to lay out the stages of meditation in the preceding classes. Oh, sound has stopped in the live chat. How's that? Can you hear me now? Let me see. Hello, hello, hello. Testing, testing. Testing, testing, testing. Hey, hey. Right. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, this is part of the reason it's good to have at least one person attending live. Otherwise, technical problems go unseen. Right. So subtle excitement means that there are distractions happening in the background. So you're holding your mind on the object. Your mind never fully leaves the object, but sort of in the background of your mind, there's like white noise happening. Your mind is getting ready to jump, but it hasn't jumped yet. So another way to think about this is that there is beneath the main field of awareness. In other words, the main field of awareness is sort of like you focus on this little patch of skin on your nostril, for example, and it has filled up your awareness, right? So that patch of nostril seems like it's filling the main sphere of your awareness. But sort of in the background of that awareness, ready to jump forth, Pabonka Rinpoche says. Pabonka Rinpoche is another really important Lama in the modern Gelug tradition. He says it's ready to jump forth as a thought about some attractive object, right? So remember, this is a derivative of attachment. It's jumping off the object because it's trying to run after an object that it finds attractive. And so your main field of your awareness is focused on this little patch of skin here, right? Which has now more or less become quite large in your experience and is taking up your whole experience. But in the background of that, part of your mind is sort of like water under the ice of a river, is gurgling and preparing to jump off the object, right? There's movement under the surface of this mind that's holding the object, and your mind is, we could say it's almost like your mind's getting a little bored and it's getting ready to jump. Or in the background, the process of an idea starting to form is there preparing to jump off the object. So it's actually quite difficult to get the experience of that because your mind already needs to be quite stable and you need to have very good introspection or alertness, that other mental factor that's checking the quality of your meditation. Yeah. You need to have very good alertness already, which you can only have if you have good concentration to begin with. Okay? Right. Um, I'm only going to cover laxity briefly because that's not the main problem we're going to have in meditation. So, laxity is the second problem you have in meditation. It literally means to sink in, to sink down, to be swallowed up, to be immersed in, to lose consciousness. So, this term basically has to do with your mind getting more dull. Has to do with your mind sort of becoming cognitively dark. Your mind is not fresh. Your mind is sluggish. It has to do with every night when you start to get tired, and you're headed towards sleep, you experience mental dullness, right? Your mind lacks lucidity, freshness, being cognitively fresh. So the second major problem that you have in meditation is laxity, which is a lack of lucidity or cognitive freshness. Your mind is dull and not bright and sort of cognitively capable. So once you start gaining some concentration, then your mind will start experiencing this quality. The reason is that your mind starts to become distracted inwards towards sort of the mental quietness, we could say, right? So your mind starts to get quiet, and then you start to sort of, you see people sitting around like this in meditation where they're all crunched up and they're like, and then afterwards they get out of meditation and they're like this. They're like totally out of it. And the reason for this is that their mind actually isn't going into meditation, it's going into cognitive dullness. So this is a major problem where once your mind has some stability, that the next thing that happens is it experiences this cognitive dullness. And then you have to work on brightening the mind, making the mind highly lucid and fresh while not losing the stability. And that's a challenge because when you make your mind bright and fresh, it has a tendency to then want to chase after attractive objects. In other words, it has a tendency to become excited and try to jump off the object. So then you're having to balance these two qualities of being stable and being fresh, which requires introspection, requires alertness. The mind has to be able to be aware of its own state and know how it's doing in the concentration. Is my mind becoming too excited? Is my mind becoming too lax? That depends on whether or not you're aware of your internal state. And then you have to apply mindfulness. In other words, you have to remember, well, what are the instructions? Okay, if my mind's too sort of dull, I need to brighten and freshen up the mind. And if my mind is too excited and jumping all over the place, I need to bring the mind down and calm it down, right? And for probably all of us in this room, the major problem is going to be that our mind is excited, not that it's not fresh enough. Okay? So that's coarse or obvious mental laxity. And then there's a subtle level of mental laxity, which basically all of my teachers have said until you experience it not being there, there's no way to really describe it. So the best that they can, it's sort of like trying to describe the color of an orange to a blind person, or the taste of vanilla to someone who's never tasted vanilla. There's no way to describe it. But they define it as that when you have perfect concentration and when you already have a great deal of mental lucidity and you have mostly eliminated also subtle excitement, then your mind will start to have periods where it is absolutely stunningly, vibrantly fresh, awake. The cognitive the brightness and the cognitive ability that you have at that time is like stunningly awake and aware in a way that you've never experienced before in your life, or very, very, very rarely experienced in your life. Maybe only the peak experiences that you've had in training in martial arts or doing sports or those sorts of things, you know, where time has slowed down and your mind seems absolutely super capable. uh, that this is what's being discussed here. So that like absolutely crystal clear, fresh, unobstructed, perfect lucidity of mind is uh, is what it means to not have subtle mental laxity. So all of us, all day long, even in our best moments, generally speaking, still have subtle mental laxity. So this is a quality that you only develop by training in meditation. Okay? So in the next session, I'm going to briefly go over 9 stages of calm abiding, which is the process Kamala. And then after that, I'm going to go over once again the instructions for Foundation 1, and I'm going to start working in some of this terminology that comes from the actual text on how to train in concentration into our practice of training in Foundation 1. Okay? All right. I will see you in, if I'm not mistaken, just double check my schedule here, in 30 minutes.